This week's episode is a solo cast and the season finale to season 2, which feels like a big deal for me. This is my last time recording as a student of Chinese medicine. I graduate at the beginning of December. This is also my last time recording while living in Orlando because I move at the beginning of next year. So I reflect on all of that. These past 3 years have been huge for me. It's been my big spiritual remembering and also the journey of learning how to own my power. And it's not been easy, and I go way into that. And of course, I talk about a ceremony. There's always a ceremony in a solo cast. So I kind of pick up where I left off with my devotional practice to Lakshmi episode, and I go deeper into this journey of manifestation and channeling and all that good stuff. I share the mistakes, the lessons, the plot twists. This is an episode that includes all the things that make the School of Whispers what it is. So I just want to thank you all so much for being on this journey with me. It's, I do this podcast very much for me. It really provides me so many answers with these reflections, but the fact that I have you guys, giving a shit and tuning in and sharing your feedback and experiencing, we're all on very different journeys, but these emotions, they're all universal, and being able to share them with you, God, it makes me feel so much less alone. And that's really why I started the School of Whispers podcast or just the School of Whispers period, because my dream is to provide an outlet for people to feel less alone on this strange and trippy experience that is the human experience, especially with somebody with a strong spiritual lens. So yeah, I love you guys. I'm so grateful. I'm not gonna lie, this was actually kind of towards the last 2 months. It was a tough season for me. I kind of lost that little extra zing. I don't know if you guys felt it, but it was the last thing I wanted. Usually the podcast is the first thing I want to do. It's the thing that gives me life. And just with school and integrating, it was kind of the last thing on my list that I wanted to get done. And I was sharing that with Jordana, and she was saying that, it was really valuable for me to share this because, we see everyone doing the thing, and it's so awesome to watch. But, nobody really talks about those low moments where they're in their dream, and then all of a sudden their dream kind of feels like a burden in a way. And, at this point, I made a commitment. This podcast is my baby. And so we will go through these growing pains together. And God, I'm just so excited to be done with school and to be in this whole new era, this whole new season of my life. Season 3 is going to come with new artwork, well, of course, every episode's got new artwork, but if you're on Apple Podcasts, it's all the same, but on Spotify, it's new artwork every episode. So we're gonna have new stuff, a new just logo kind of thing. We're gonna have a new intro. So actually, if you know anybody who is good with music and intros and producing all of that stuff, please send them my way. And I have one last favor to ask of you. If you have gained something from any episode and you've yet to leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, please consider taking the time to leave one for me so that this podcast can continue to grow. It can be something. I would really, really appreciate that. And also maybe sharing some episodes that have really resonated with you, whether it's to your social media or to a friend. That would be the icing on the cake for these past almost 2 years of doing the podcast. All right, I'll let you jump into the show, and I will be feeling your energy next season. You are listening to the School of Whispers podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, and this is my space to get real, open, and weird about my life experiences as a psychic, medium, energy healer, and student of Chinese medicine. On the show, I'll be sharing my healing journey and the concepts I've learned along the way, and I'll be having guests on talking about the same sort of thing. I am so happy you're here, and I hope this show leaves you feeling inspired and empowered to learn how to listen to the whispers of your own body and spirit. Let's get into the show. Hello, my friend. I am really happy to be here. I'm also kind of overwhelmed. I feel like I kind of chalked up this podcast to be, for myself, to be a lot of things. And now my brain is like, how are we going to put it all together? And I really had to just let it go. I tuned in before pressing the record button. Of course, I called you in, and then I called for a guide as per usual. And the guide who came in was the archetype queen, which, well, first she came in as Cleopatra, and then I just saw all these other badass queens who were unafraid of being seen. If anything, they craved being seen and celebrated. And I guess that's the energy I'm gonna try to pull in here. It feels very appropriate. I'm in the process of getting a painting done by my friend Summer. I'll link her episode in the show notes. She's an artist, and she just finished an archetype series, and we decided to do a trade, and I asked her to do a painting for me based on this series. And we did an interview. The process is a lot more involved than I thought it would be, and I love it, for her to really just kind of figure out what is it that I want from this painting and what I hope for. And also, like I remember one of the first questions she asked is, what do I want to commemorate with this painting? And I immediately started crying. I cried probably 2/3 of the whole hour that we did this interview. And it was, well, what I realized I didn't know that I wanted to commemorate, to kind of have a stamp in time. I see art as a stamp in time of who we are and how we feel, and if whether you're the muse or the artist. And I realized I wanted to commemorate my time in Orlando and everything that came with it. And the more we talked about it, the more we realized the archetype that I have a lot of uncomfortable emotions around, but has been so much at the forefront, is the queen. And when I forget how it came up in our interview conversation, but I said to her, I realized I don't even know what does the queen even mean? And the queen is about personal power. And I remember just feeling so tight in my chest and in my throat and my tummy on that idea, my personal power. Yet it's what I've been working towards since my big awakening moment in Orlando. I kind of want to walk you through everything. I want to take a little walk down memory lane with Orlando. And yeah, I guess this is my time. This is my time to own myself, to become the queen, I guess. I don't know. I did a little bit journaling about the queen, and I feel like I have a long ways to go on to identify what that really means in my life. Well, actually, now that I think of it, what I can do is go back through season 2 and listen with that lens. But yeah, I mentioned this in the last episode that I will be moving, if you didn't already hear. I'm leaving Orlando. I'm going back home to West Palm Beach, which I have a lot of mixed feelings about. And I know a huge fear of mine is that, I've grown so much. I've met so many beautiful, wonderful people here in Orlando. And, the city itself, the land of Orlando, not honestly too fond of. It's too much city for me. There are things that I love, but it's not where my heart sings. But the people that I've met and who I've become here, I definitely feel a really strong attachment to. And I'm afraid that going back to West Palm Beach will be a step backwards. And I know that this fear isn't the truth, or it's not really, like, it's not me. It's an old skin. It's just my ego going. Like, I don't need people, it's funny, like, when I tell people, when I voice just like how I feel about going back and I get all these reassurances, I want to say, I know, I know this all already. I just want to voice it out loud because I don't know, I get a lot out of sharing my insecurities, my thoughts, my fears. I mean, that's partly why I started this podcast. I mean, I didn't start the podcast with the intention of getting this real with people. My God. But it's just my very nature of, it's the nature of me. And yes, I know better. I do know better, but I still want to acknowledge that fear, because with that fear comes the other side of it. I recently had done a golden needle ceremony for somebody, and within golden needle, they said that, actually, let me pull it up because the way they put it was, I could feel that it was the presence of a guide saying this. The journey of distrust is a journey of deeper trust in yourself. And I mean, shit, that's actually probably the exact thing that I could say about that, about just voicing my fears about moving back home. And a big fear is that I'm going to hide again. Oh, God, I get really emotional about that because, when we live somewhere at home, there's so much energetic charge to who we were and the suit, the identity that we created in that place. And God, I've got years logged into West Palm Beach, and it does feel really easy to be myself here in Orlando. And who is me? Like, I talk about these things. I have all these friends who we could talk about spirituality and deep work and deep insecurities and family stuff, shadow stuff, but also the strange. My, being able to express my light language here is really easy amongst the people I've met, especially in clinic, or just being hairy, like having unshaved legs and unshaved armpits. I know that if you've been to West Palm Beach or you live there, you might understand what I mean. I feel like there's, and again, it might be me projecting, but I feel like there is a lot of eyes, a lot of watching eyes in West Palm Beach. Everyone's watching each other and everyone's looking at what they're wearing, and it's just so much identity there. And I feel so much like I love to travel alone because I love to become anonymous. And I feel like it's just a little bit more difficult there. And I, especially, being around my family with my mom, having her eyes on how I present myself to the world is going to be a little triggering for me. And I don't want to give my power away anymore. And I know that a huge source of my personal power is how I express myself. It's not how people view me. It's how I feel showing myself to the world and not hiding. I'm really tired of hiding. And I've mentioned this a few times in a few podcasts, but there's this whole concept in this book I recently listened to of how life is like an Easter egg hunt, and all the discomforts and the dark corners and shadows that we are presented with can be Easter eggs because we have no idea what's inside. But if we can engage in the hunt, in the search for the Easter egg, and find that Easter egg and have the courage to open it, we find a new piece of ourselves. And I don't want to throw anything back in the Easter eggs. I want to keep them wide open. And I want to celebrate the little pieces of myself that I found, especially in the past 3 years. So to walk back a little bit, what really, really, when Summer asked me, well, what is it? What is it about these 3 years? Like thinking about when this journey began and what is that big thing? And that big thing is coming home to myself and learning who I really am. At the end of 2020 was when I moved to Orlando, and I started listening to a lot of podcasts on spirituality. My big spiritual awakening happened in 2019, actually. It was when I got my first energy healing. I was in a really low, depressed place, and I remember somebody that I was teaching yoga to, she offered energy work for me, and I was just so desperate. I was like, I will do anything, but I don't believe in these things, but let's give it a shot. And I've probably told this story before, so bear with me. I'll tell it an adapted version, I guess. But I remember that first energy healing when we were in this room, and it was very simple. I just remember light streaming through her sliding glass doors, and I hear a hum turn on. Like it was like a machine turned on, and she put the machine over my head very slowly, and I start to feel this machine affecting the rest of my body, this vibration. And at first it was really nice, and then it became really dense and intense, and I remember thinking, I want her to move it. This is too much. And then she moved it down my body, and I felt that it was like an explosion from my head and down my body. And then at the end, and I remember like kind of similar to acupuncture, I was having dreams where I was very conscious of what was going on and saying, oh, I'm getting a healing. I got to go back to my body. See you guys. And kind of jumping through portals and then jumping back to myself. And I remember at the end, I was like, what was that machine? That was crazy. And she goes, what machine? No, the one that you were putting over my body that was humming. She goes, Steph, I called in you across all timelines and dimensions. There was no machine. And I looked around the room and I realized, there was nothing there. And then that was my big introduction to energy. And then from that point was just, little awakenings here and there. In 2020, 2019, both were those years of just learning how to like myself, learning how to love myself, learning how to accept really intense, difficult emotions and a hard past and a lot of self-betrayal. But I wasn't really aware of that self-betrayal. I was just aware of the pent-up anger and learning about radical responsibility and mirrors and angels and source. And all of a sudden, I'm like starting to open myself up to the idea of, I guess, psychic type things and angels and aliens and stuff that when I first listened to them, I was like, all right, just take a step back, chill, listen, observe, don't draw an opinion, just open yourself up. And I remember at one point realizing that I really wished all of this could exist. I was thinking, these people are kind of nuts, but the idea of the world that they live in, I really wish it existed. I imagine the magic that would happen and so I kind of, under that, the premise of the reality that you believe in is the reality you create, kind of started to say things to myself like, I believe in magic. I believe that I am of source. I am of God. And especially growing up in Catholic school, there was always just this disconnect of God and us as the sinners and the children, but we could never have that power of the Lord and Holy Spirit and Jesus and all that good stuff. And then within that, those first few months in Orlando, so I moved in November, and by January, I was starting to have a lot of really difficult respiratory issues. And I sooner found out that it was toxic mold, and I found breath work within that time. And I had already found breath work, pranayama, through my yoga teacher training and just going to a lot of yoga classes. But I found more intensive hypoxic, really lung activating breath work. And I started to combine the whole concept of the quote unquote Wim Hof breathwork method, that circular deep inhale, exhale, deep inhale, exhale. And I combined that with Bastrika, which is breath of fire. It's a Kundalini breath. And I was doing that. By this point, I was starting to do it every morning at like 5 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. And so there was just one particular day in January, I think it was either shortly after, I had started school and I was working a new job and everything was new and exciting. And I had a conflict with my dad. My dad and I, we have a tough relationship, and it's just a constant source of lessons for me. And so, I'm not really a confrontational person. Confrontation, really, that's like my skydiving, my bungee jumping, whatever. That, like, nothing gets my adrenaline pumping like confrontation. And I had to confront him and tell the truth about something that I knew was going to be hard for me to say and hard for him to hear. And there was just no acceptance, no acknowledgement of, I just didn't get what I was looking for from him. And I remember hanging up and saying to Mana, my husband, like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Oh my God, I'm panicking. So I remember taking a hit of my little bubbler of weed, and I was like, that didn't do anything. So I went outside, and I lived right on Lake Eola, and I ran around Lake Eola a couple times and got home. And I was like, nope, still panicking, can't run from it, can't numb from it. And so I went to my bedroom. I remember this clear as day. I went to my bedroom, I sat down on the floor, and I started doing that hypoxic breath work. And within that breath work, looking back, I'd yet to do ayahuasca. I think the only medicines I was working with at that time was cacao. And I had done mushrooms before, but it was just different. It was just different then. So I had no reference point, but looking back, it kind of reminds me a little bit of ayahuasca, where all of a sudden my hearing became really, really loud and intense. And I went from feeling like I could hear all the electronics in the room to the air in the room. And then my inner vision became really dark. And then it felt like my head exploded. It felt like somebody unscrewed the cap of my crown and popped it open. And I had just all this rushing in of colors and sounds, and definitely not going to be able to make it through this podcast without crying, just like with all this reflection. I had like just everything come at me all at once. And with that came a memory from my childhood that was of sexual abuse. And it was like always in the back of my head. And I've definitely touched base on this throughout the podcast. This is kind of me just really giving you the story, the chronological timeline here. And so it felt like everything went from fisheye lens of my life, and then all of a sudden it was just wide out, spanned out vision, big widescreen vision. And I realized that, you know, this memory that I'd always had and I'd always felt a little bit shameful, a little bit guilty of, I realized, oh, there was somebody there who shouldn't have been there. And like, this was not okay. And all of a sudden I like had a rushing in of realizing why I was the way I was in a lot of ways and how I was dissociated from my body. But it was so weird. It was so intense. And I guess that's the nature of duality, because with all that darkness came all this light as well. I felt like all my ancestors were like there, but more than my ancestors, just the faces and beings, and which I had felt before in my life, but before this point, it was just really scary, and I was like very much in denial and distrusting of myself. And by this point, I had a lot more trust in myself and a lot more desire to believe. And yeah, it was just fucking wild. And I remember like going to take a shower and just being like, what the fuck was that? And I kept it to myself for a week or so, and which made it all worse because it was just such a pressure cooker. But within that time of keeping it to myself, I continued the breath work. I continued my cacao ceremonies. And within those cacao ceremonies, all of a sudden, I'm getting really intense visions of like messages. And I'm having beings come in like they had done before, but this time clear messages of, I don't know, like it just, they felt like actual human beings. And I had a lot of validation from when I shared this with people that I worked with or people who came my way. I started eventually doing readings for others. And feeling my ancestors, God, I remember how many times I cried and like feeling like my future daughters and just hearing them be like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And with the lens that I had built from everything and in those moments, I realized that it was not all for nothing. Like bad things happen, but all of a sudden I was being able to choose that it wasn't for nothing. And I got to move from victimhood to empowerment with all of that. And, you know, Q in school, God, school, you know, I heard somebody recently who completely disagreed with my point of view. So, yeah, take it or leave it. But I really, truly believe that being in a program if you don't already know, I'm in school for Chinese medicine at the Florida College of Integrative Medicine. But side note, if you want to go there, please talk to me first. I have a lot of things to say. But yeah, don't run into something that you don't know about yet. Because, I mean, granted, I'm so glad that I did it, obviously. But if I had known some things, yeah, I would like to help educate you, to empower you to make the right decision here. But, okay, back to my regular tangent. It's like school was... The whole entity of Chinese medicine was like, oh, you want to heal people with energy and herbs? That's cute. Well, you have to heal yourself first. And I do remember at that time, I was really trying to establish myself with teaching yoga and doing body work, and none of it was working out. And I remember crying out to the sky and saying, I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to be a good person. Universe, fuck you. Can't you just help me help others? And that was when the clairaudience, outside of meditation, turned on clear as day. And I heard a voice say, clear as day, you cannot heal others until you have healed yourself. And I believe that as healers, we're never done. You know, it is our prerogative. If you want to be an effective healer, if you want to heal people on a deeper level than just the physical, if you want to help people go deep, you have to go deep yourself. So it is a continuous process, but I had yet to begin. I had yet to really actually dive deep. And I think how I wanted to help others was in accepting themselves and listening to themselves, and I had yet to truly, truly do that. And so fast forward through all of that, you know, I met my mentor in energy work, Dr. Adamson. I had my first entity removals and I learned so much about all of it, and I share it in all the podcasts. And it really, what it gave me, all of this time in Orlando, it's given me this strong base of who I was before I came here in this lifetime. And I think we hear a lot of people talk about these things, and if you've yet to learn this lesson, like really embody this lesson, it might not make sense to you, it might not land home, but my God, if you expose yourself to the world and you don't have a strong baseline of who you are, it is so easy for others to paint that picture, to tell you who you are. And that is no identity. That is no identity to take home with you. That is no identity that's going to take you through the long run, because it's going to constantly shift and you're going to feel so shit in that perspective, because everyone's perspective of you is always changing. And you are one of many things for others, but you are never going to be, how do I put this? For other people, you will always either be the mirror, the one who reflects what others either want to see themselves or don't want to see themselves. And I've learned that I can be very triggering for people, and I've accepted that. That's been something really uncomfortable for me to accept that. My mirror for a lot of people reflects something that they don't want to see in themselves, because I've brought all of that to my surface, and that's okay. That's okay. So we got the mirror, but you may also reflect a lesson. And there's lessons within mirrors, but you might also just be a vehicle for a new lesson, a new way of being for others. And what's another thing that you could be? So we've got the mirror, we've got the lesson, and yeah, let's just put it at that. You're always going to be a mirror and a lesson for somebody else. And if you don't have a strong baseline knowing of yourself, without anyone else's opinion, without anything that you've been in this lifetime, it's like strip back. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you actually, when you're just an idea, less than an idea. You're a fragment of an idea. You're this amalgamation of energy that just is existing, changing, living, dying, morphing, absorbing, releasing. I don't know if that's making sense, but if you don't have that, then you'll never really know yourself. And that actually takes me to pivot a little bit into the most recent happening, kind of tapping back into my devotional practice to Lakshmi. And when I shared with you guys the my relationship with Durma and Lakshmi and channeling and manifestation and all of that stuff. My God. Okay, I'm not going to go back into the story, so I really hope that you listen to this podcast. Maybe pause. This is like a 2-hour special with Stephanie here. But if you haven't listened to that podcast, you will be missing some context here. But to make a long story short, I had started through a ceremony. I had kind of opened myself up to a being kind of entering the suit with me. And it was this old woman, and just a really interesting, strange experience. But it felt magical. It truly did. And I had gone to my friend Vanita and asked, kind of like shared with her a few details and things. And she was like, this kind of sounds like the widow within the Hindu deities and Duma. And I had all these things happen, and I was like, all right, cool. I'm doing I'm working with Duma and blah, 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 blah. Well, guys, boy, do I have a plot twist for you. Okay. So, let me tell you kind of a few things that happened with her. So I don't know if I mentioned this in the last podcast, but she had told me that I was going to learn a lot about grief. I was going to release the grief of my ancestors, and I was going to experience a lot of grief, which I wasn't excited about. Who would be excited about that? All right. And then she also, within a golden needle, she came in and she told me that I needed to do 40 days without red meat, and I needed to give her an offering of red meat, like some bloody red meat. I did it for about 2 weeks, and then I was like, this is kind of dumb. I need to feed myself red meat because I mean, in Chinese medicine, being blood deficient is just, it's not a fun place to be in. And I know that my body absorbs in terms of absorbing nutrients that's going to feed my blood from a TCM, traditional Chinese medicine perspective. Red meat is my go-to. And so I'm really glad that my intuition kicked off there and, you know, I got that. But there was this another thing that she was just very flattering. She was very like, you're such a special, sweet girl. You're this, you're that. I'm going to take care of you. Then another thing I felt with her was, well, coming back from my dieta, I have been feeling like just not really into crowds and socializing with a bunch of other energies in the room. I kind of like to, my true nature is truly, I like to be around like 3 to 5 people. Anything more than that, I've definitely like energetically just a little overwhelmed, a little bit drained. But I felt like I was turning in on myself even more and more working with her. So just keep all that in mind. So then Vanita and we had planned a joint golden needle with her and her mom. So doing a joint golden needle ceremony, if you're not well versed in golden needle, it is this ceremony where, well, I've made it ceremonial, but it's an acupuncture protocol. It's an esoteric protocol that enables you to get into a meditative trance-like state. And I've done a golden needle at the same time as my best friend. We've done it like 2 or 3 times. And it was a really beautiful, amazing experience. Actually, if anyone's listening to this and would like to experience that, I really want to practice working on this with others. I'm happy to do this right now at a donation base so that I can really hone in on skills needed for this kind of experience. So reach out to me if you're interested in this. But yeah, so I, did a whole ceremony and we're in the protocol with Vanita and her mom. And long story short, so Vanita, her mom, and her brother was there. And actually, just to give you a little context too, if you don't already know, Vanita, she channels, she has a very strong special relationship with the goddess Kali, the goddess of chaos. And she has this special gift of manifestation. And it's something that's common in the Hindu religion. And it's like the goddess or God manifests through a human body, and it's like right in front of you. It's no longer the human that you know, it is the deity that is here. And it's definitely taken her many years of really fine-tuning and honing in on finding containment and control and light within this gift, because with this gift comes a very wide open crown. And I have known for a couple of months that this is something that I'm interested in. I'm afraid. I'm scared. I'm scared of. And I also, I've just felt myself almost like being groomed by my guides for this. And so Vanita and Kali, and then Vanita's brother, he manifests Bhairav, who is kind of like the escort for Kali. He helps clear the room and provide protection. And so to make a long story short, eventually Vanita starts channeling and we take all the needles out of her and her mom because it's just manifesting. And it's just a very physical thing. And she said, we cannot proceed because there is a shadow in the room. So Kali through Vanita says this, and I immediately knew I am the shadow. And I second guessed myself. And she repeated that again a few times, and finally I accepted it. And inwardly I was like, all right, I'm the shadow. I'm going to say this out loud. But before I did, I heard a thought of, nobody likes the shadow. That's why I didn't want to admit it. That's why I don't feel welcomed to declare this myself as the shadow. And I thought, ooh, I like that. Nobody likes the shadow. So I decided to say this out loud. But the voice that came out of me was very much not my own. It, like, at one point I was kind of inwardly giggling. Like, I sound like fucking, who's the Jonas Brothers' wife? Nick Jonas's wife. I gotta look this up. Yes, Priyanka Chopra. And yeah, I said, nobody likes the shadow. And I was like, what? And then at this point, my head's down. My hands are over my face, over my hair. And I kind of realized, oh, this old woman's back, because that's what she did. Like, she would very much like acquaint herself with my skin and feel really like, ooh, I love this like young, beautiful face and this hair and like this body. Oh, another thing to say real quick is working with Duma, quote unquote Duma. A really strong message was that I'm going to shave my head, right? I mentioned this in the last episode, or not my last solo cast, was that I'm going to shave my head because this is what she says I'm going to do. I have to do. It's just keeping that in mind. All right. So yeah, I'm like touching myself and I'm like, ooh, like feeling like a little bit strange, a little bit different. And I kind of feel like Stephanie kind of steps into the back burner, and Vanita turns to me and her eyes are closed, her body's, Kundalini activated, and she touches my third eye and my heart, and I feel this old woman presence come stronger and stronger, more to the surface. And I repeat a few times again, like, nobody likes the shadow. And Vanita kind of comes to for a moment. She goes, and I could hear the fear in her voice. And she goes, Mom, it's the woman. I think it's this woman, this soul that they've been acquainted with in their past. It's kind of associated a little bit with her ancestors. But the moment she said that, I felt a deep satisfaction in my body. Like, yeah, she knows me. And she starts telling her story. And again, as Vanita / Kali, I think Kali kind of snapped back in again. As she's relaying this story, again, I'm feeling really like, ooh, it feels so good to be seen, for her to tell my story. I'm kicking back and relaxing. And so what she said, well, I do remember saying she wants to speak with the mother. Yes, I said that out loud. She wants to speak with the mother. And so Vanita calls in Durga, who Durgaya is the mother in the Hindu religion. And yeah, so here we go. So she starts telling her story, and it's all very slow, but it's the story of this old woman that's in me, who is not Dhumavati. She is not a deity. She is a human, or was a human, who became an entity, like a dark, heavy vibration. And she said, okay, what was her story? Let me remember. Yes. Okay. So she started channeling, manifesting, and she was pregnant at the time. And I don't think Vanita said this out loud, but I knew that her husband had died in like a tribal war. Like, he had went to go fight for the village and he had died. And so I'm in this world of sadness and darkness and grief, and I'm pregnant, and all of a sudden, like, manifestation kind of steps in. And it's like this bright light for me. And she's all excited, this old woman. I keep on saying me and then her. Okay, so just if you're not aware, this is a story, obviously not my story. This is a woman who I guess was in India. And so she told a family member, I think it was her brother, and he ran to an elder in the village and told them what was going on. And the elders were like, oh no, this is not good. This is not a gift that she's supposed to have. And these are dark energies, and this needs to stop. And for whatever reason, what they decided needed to happen for this to stop was that they needed to sacrifice the child that was in my womb. And right before she said that, I started sobbing uncontrollably. And I felt this sharp stabbing pain in my lower belly. And then she says it out loud, because I just remember saying, my baby. But, Stephanie is like, what is going on? I'm just expressing. And when she said that, it really hit home. Yeah, they took my baby. And my sobs went from like anger and rage. And like, this is not my typical crying. This is this old woman's version of crying. And I'm like going like, so wailing, furious. And a couple other things happened, but basically she was just like, you need to leave now. Kali through Vanita says this, like, it's time for you to go. And I remember Vanita's mother saying, why are you even here? What does Stephanie have to do with this? Why are you messing with Stephanie? And I have so much respect for Vanita's mom, anyone's mother. Like, I have deep respect for, and I would never speak like this to anyone. But the old woman through me was like, stop talking, stop asking so many questions. This one talks too much. And so I said that out loud, and I was so embarrassed. But she said, though, when she said, why Stephanie? She said, well, Stephanie cares. Like, nobody cares about me, but Stephanie has compassion for me. And that definitely registered. I was thinking, you're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong here, but it is time for you to go. And so Kali said, Stephanie, you need to let her go. And so I say out loud, I let you go. And through this whole experience, I'm never afraid. I'm really more just intrigued. And the moment that I feel fear, though, is when Vanita's brother, when Bhairav starts manifesting, and he kind of starts, he's somebody who's very proficient, very gifted at releasing dark energy, and he kind of starts barking, and I'm like jumping, and I feel in myself like I'm jumping out of my skin, and I feel so much fear course through my body, and I realize, oh, this isn't me, this is her. She's being pushed out. And so I kind of just open my heart and I say, I let you go. And I start kind of coughing and sputtering. I kind of felt like I was going to throw up. And then I just sigh and, and Kali says, all right, it is done. It's over. And then she did a womb blessing for me. She kind of told me that it's time for me to step into becoming a mother and all these other things. And yeah, that was really it for the most part. And Vanita and I both felt very bamboozled, very much feeling like we got tricked, because I love my girl. I love my V. She's very protective of me. And I think she partly blamed herself for this dark spirit attaching itself to me. And I very much, which, like, there's no blame on her. I know now that needed to happen, and I'm really grateful that it did. But I very much felt like I used all my discernment tools. I was always asking, like, is this okay? Is everything all good? Like, my guides, asking my people, we good here? Is she good guy? And it felt all right. And so within that, Vanita's mom gave me helped share a lot of lessons about deities and manifestation. So looking back at everything I mentioned before, lesson 1, a deity that is of a higher vibration is not going to want to teach me about a low density emotion, grief. They want to teach us about joy and empowerment and love. They don't want to bring you to a lower vibration like that. So that's lesson 1. Lesson 2, high vibrational beings are going to ask for high vibrational gifts. So fruit or flowers are of a very high vibration. Meanwhile, red meat is a very low density vibration. Think of it this way. Red meat feeds the body. It feeds the yin of the human body. And the yin is that substance in Chinese medicine. The yin is the physical holding vessel, whereas the yang is the spirit. It's the light. It's the fire. And so think of it this way, like there's no good or bad. It's high density, low density. And when a lower density bean. It's totally fine for me to feed my body. Like, there's nothing wrong with having red meat, despite what all the spiritual community wants to say about it. If you are really connected with the food on your plate, there's nothing wrong with it. There's different foods for different seasons of your life, and you just need to be aware of that. And you have to understand, why am I putting this in my body and how am I feeding myself? But me depriving myself of nourishment and then providing red meat for another being, she was trying to weaken me and to gain strength on herself, within herself, her own being. So that's lesson number 2. Lesson number 3 is and this I actually learned on my own, because the next day, I'm just kind of going through the shock of it. And I go to my altar and I offer some fruit for Durgaya, for Kali and Bhairav, just a thank you for being there. Because I remember at one point too, I'm tying this in together. Oh, this is why I love solocast. Okay. Stepping back to that ceremony where I got my exorcism / womb blessing, when she called Durga in, I felt her surrounding me as she told the story, like comforting me as she told the story of the woman getting her baby cut out and sacrificed. And the old woman said to me, "I never stopped bleeding, and neither will you," because at the time I was on my period. And I remember hearing that and being like, "Bitch, that's not a nice thing to say." And I felt Durga come in as if to like protect me a little bit more, to separate me a little bit more from this banema, from this evil eye, such an unkind thing to say to someone. And at the end of the session, I remember seeing the image of a queen stepping into the room, and it felt like Durga. And we are actually right now, we are in the 9 days of the celebration of the 9 forms of Durga in the Hindu religion. I'm actually going to be going to the temple with Vanita this weekend to celebrate Kali. But yeah, I remember seeing the queen step into the room and kind of trying to wonder, like, who's that queen? Who's that queen? Is it Durga? And now I'm kind of I'm realizing, oh, it's me. I am the queen. It is me stepping into owning my power. It's so cool. God, I love these moments. But yeah, when I did that little offering of fruit for Kali, Bhairav, and Durga, with Kali, it was really, really strong visions. And I was really grateful, because I felt like I was having a third eye block from that whole experience. I'm like almost like the scar tissue of it, of not really trusting myself. And Kali came in strong as she does. And she said to me, like, "You're going to learn discernment here with me." And she gave an example so she gave me a couple of examples of, she was like, "All right, discern. Is this a high density or a low density being?" And it was cool because she matched it with images that didn't necessarily match the vibration. For example, I had one being that looked like a bright little light butterfly flower thing. And she said, "Everyone thinks you're so beautiful." And then I saw like a low, dark creature come in and said, what did they say? It was something like, "Owning your power will involve the darkness of others, or people not being, happy, or like, people getting triggered and upset." And I thought about it and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to throw those images away and listen to the message. And I realized, okay, the dark being was the one who said, "Everyone thinks you are so beautiful," because that is a conditional statement. A light being would say, "You are beautiful because you are." This statement of "everyone thinks you're so beautiful" is contingent on what everyone else thinks of me, which ties me into what I was saying in the very beginning of the podcast. And so, like, I've just been learning that. And so that was another thing that I've learned, that flattery is not going to be necessarily a high vibration. Reminders of the truth of who I am, that's a high vibration, but like, you're such a special girl, I'm gonna take care of you, things like that. No, that ain't it. And that actually makes me think of another lesson Kali taught me in that little offering, was because I asked her, what's the point of all of this? Like, what is this, an ego? Is the whole channeling manifestation thing, is this an ego-driven thing? And she goes, it can be, but the whole point of this is not to be the most powerful person in the room. That's the pursuit of the ego, to gain the power, and show the power, be seen in the power. I think that also, that lives under the illusion that the power we seek is outside of us, whereas it's inside of us, and it's in all of us. You're not unique for having infinite power. That's just the human experience, and it's just up to us to access and own it from within. But yeah, what Kali said was, the whole point of this is to know myself. The whole point of manifestation isn't to, again, be the most powerful person in the room. The whole point of it is to open myself up deeper and deeper to who I really am and what is possible within this reality. And when I was like, well, what is it? What is at the end of what is the possibility? And she says, ecstasy. Just feeling, I just got chills. The pure ecstasy of what it means to exist as a being, as a soul, as a soul who's connected to the earth and her body and all the unique sensations of human physiology. But we don't stop just there, because we're also connected to all these massive vibrational beings, all this source, God, goddess energy. That's the whole point of it, is to experience it. But then another thing, just to the last two lessons I learned actually from Vanita's mom and her brother from discernment, was a being who came, when she came in, Vanita's mom immediately knew. She was like, when the being said, nobody cares about me, nobody likes the shadow, only Stephanie cares. That's a low vibration. That's like, woe is me, oh, poor me, making you feel bad. That's a low density being. And then I remember Vanita's brother saying, Steph, after this whole experience, do you still want to shave your head? And I took a step back and I felt, and I realized, no, I actually really don't. And he goes, yeah, that just doesn't seem like you. That just doesn't seem like the thing that you're meant to do right now. And I go, no, not at all. And I realized it was this being who wanted this. I don't really understand fully she wanted me to expose my crown so that she can latch on a little bit stronger, or the trauma of shaving my head. I don't know. I'm still open to the idea across my life of doing this, but right now I realize that that's not what I exactly want in the moment. So another thing that I have learned, because I'm really very much in the world of discernment right now, is smoking weed was really, really hurting my discernment. And so I'm going to be honest, after getting back from dieta, I fell into a slippery slope of smoking weed again, because I had out there and returning home, a lot of really uncomfortable things were coming up. And I was just like, no, I'm in my last semester of school. This is fucking rough. We'll face this later. I just want to feel good. And so I went from smoking on the weekends to every other day to having 2-day breaks in the week to every day. And then sometimes when I'm not careful, it can be sometimes right before school, or right before going to the gym, or right before going to a client. And sometimes it really does amplify my ability to connect with a client, but it just all felt out of integrity for the most part. Some days it felt in integrity, but for the most part, it was a big fat fucking no. And working with that old woman it was like weed and alcohol. And alcohol is not something that I have been craving for a long time. But yeah, like I wanted to drink with her. And man, it's so interesting looking back at all of this, all the little shifts. It can be very subtle and also very obvious. And so what I did is I did a month with no THC, no CBD, no nothing, no smoking weed. And I smoked this past weekend. I got a really intense period because I was taking an herbal formula that I learned a lesson. I learned a lesson about herbal formulas. And so I had gotten a reading, my first ever reading from Miss Chrissy Reed. Actually, is her last name Reed? She's the wife of my teacher, Dr. Reed. But she, in the reading, she said, your guides want you to not smoke for as long as you can tolerate. And when I got this period, it was just full-blown world of pain plus nausea and wanting to throw up. And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on birth, particularly free birth. And I remembered hearing a lot of women within birth, when they hit a wall, they would smoke weed and it would help them completely shift and open up and change their perspective. And it also give their body a break. So I thought, all right, my guide said for as long as I can tolerate at this moment in time, I don't think I can tolerate this sensation in my body. And something that always kind of brings me back to myself is the reminder, there is no reward for she who suffered most. That being said, I'd rather smoke weed than take painkillers. And so I smoked weed this weekend, and that's it. I haven't smoked since, and I haven't felt the desire to, which is really awesome. So the last thing I want to touch on is this reading that I got, my first ever reading. It was so awesome. It was very triggering. It was very interesting. And I had asked her, like, what's the point of this channeling? Because yes, I learned that lesson from Kali, but I'm still growing my discernment. It's hard to tune in for yourself with something that's very emotionally charged. And so, yeah, I wanted somebody that I knew and trusted and with the ability to tune in a strong way to help me out. And so my first question was, is this for me or is this for others? She said, it's for others. Yes, it's for me in terms of, but I already knew the answer for that. But she said, it's going to enable you to give answers that don't come from Stephanie, to say things that I necessarily wouldn't feel comfortable saying. And that it actually makes me think back to a golden needle about a month ago. I remember her angels came to me and they were like asking me, can we step in? And I was like, no, I don't know this woman that well. I don't really know you as her angels. You will not step in. And they're like, okay, but we have a message and we would really like to step in. And things had at that point within the golden needle really slowed down. And I kept on feeling a little blip in my head of, you should give it a shot. You should see what this is like. You should try. And so I remember in that moment, I was like, fuck it. Okay, come on, angels, come on in. We're here for the highest good. No high vibrational beings are allowed, blah, blah, blah. And so they came in and my light language just like fucking turned on really strong. And I remember asking them, what's happening? And they said, oh, we're clearing you out so you can give the clear message. And this woman that I was working with was a lot older than me and had a very strong energy. And she was very stubborn. And I'm a gentle one with stubborn people. And her angels gave a very non-gentle, hard, clear message for her. So when the psychic said this, I was like, yeah, that feels about right. And then she also said that in order for me to learn, I must play. So it's okay that this being came in and I quote unquote made a mistake, because that's a lesson that I will never forget. And what I've gained from it is priceless. It completely changed my relationship with weed from feeling trapped, like it was stealing my brain all day and feeling like a victim, to feeling really disconnected from the medicine, of like not feel every day. It became like a bug on my brain. Are we going to smoke today or are we not? Are we going to do it? Are we not? And now I feel very like, no, we're not going to do it today because it's not the time to do it. Now I very much feel like weed is a medicine for the moments that I need it, when the moments that my body needs, pain-killing properties, nausea-killing properties, soothing, hugging, loving. And it's also a tool for my spirituality. And, it's also a special little treat. Like, I think about going on a date with Mana, getting high and maybe going mini golfing. That to me puts a big smile on my face. But doing it just because I want to eat a bunch of dessert and not feel bad about it, fuck that. That's goodness, say that out loud. That's definitely what I did. Doing it just to, take the edge off at the end of the day. No, I don't need that anymore. And within that month, I really told myself, this is indefinite. You're not going to smoke ever again. And I think having that mindset really helped me find different coping mechanisms, which ties me back to my dieta when I asked ayahuasca to teach me ways to soothe my nervous system. I think that very much was my integration piece there. So yes, with the manifestation and the channeling, I must play with it. And what was the other thing? She said to me, you have a choice, right? I go, what do you mean? She goes, you have a choice of who comes in. You believed you don't have a choice, that you don't have control. And because you believed that, you allowed those beings in. You allowed that low vibrational being, and you didn't have the discernment and the lesson. So because you believed you have no control and it's like a little funhouse free-for-all, you let her in. And that's okay. And now even more so, you have the choice. So she told me to ask my guides who will come in next. And she also said, in terms of the stopping the smoking weed, she goes, it's really just substances in general. And that is very much true for me. I've been feeling very called to just take a step back from using substances, such as to have a higher experience, like using mushrooms or just other plant medicines. There's nothing wrong with that, but I've just been feeling my body be a little bit like, no, not now. And that was another thing she said, it's not forever, but you are in a place where you need to learn what it's like to feel in your body. What is Stephanie like when she's at her highest? What is Steph like at her lowest? What is she like when she's in between? And that's why I had this call for so long. I felt like shit using substances, because I'm just in this season of my life where I need to know what am I like? And I think that's going to really enable me to own my power a little bit more and realize like, this is me. This is nobody else but me. And the last thing that she said, this is probably like the beginner's guide to channeling and manifestation, but she also said that to do it when I'm feeling really, really good, when I'm feeling really up and high. And honestly, since all of this, I did have a moment where I was pretty up. And then just with the whole, the Israel, Hamas, and in Palestine, with all of that, it's kind of, I definitely feel like the heaviness of it. And I think I'm also just in a little bit of a heavier season right now with that really intense period. I lost a lot of blood with it, and I've got a whole lesson on blood. Man, it's so much more than we think it is. And it makes me think of all the women who lost a lot of blood, in giving birth, or lose a lot of blood every month in their period, or even don't build their own blood in their bodies. They may have a regular period, but they don't rebuild themselves or give them a moment to rest and rebuild. That is just priming you for a state of feeling disembodied and like a little depressed. When I lost all that, I lost probably the most blood I've ever lost in a period in this past one. And yeah, I remember just going to sleep feeling like having all these dreams of like my soul trying to jump back in, because blood is yin and the yin anchors the yang. And so it was like my spirit had no anchoring. in my body. And I've had a couple of sleepless nights of really struggling to feel settled. And then during the day, I'm just like, was feeling a little bit low and depressed and a little bit out of it, disembodied. And blood is so much more than we think it is. And I'm so excited to jump into that lesson there. I'll be sure to make an episode all about my take and Chinese medicine's take, and I think ancient wisdom on blood, because it is so much more than what we think it is. But yeah, that is me, you guys. That is me for this season. I feel pretty complete here, and I'm sure I said this in the intro, but I'm going to say it again. I have so much overwhelming love and gratitude for all of you for being with me on this journey. Because of you, I'm not alone. And I know that there are other forces at play that help me remember I'm not alone, but it's good to have humans in your sphere who get it. So thank you. Season 3 will be coming in a couple of months. I have boards to study for. I have to pass. So not only to finish these 3 years of school, I got to pass 4 board exams. I'm going to try to get those knocked out before the summer, but I'm also going to be taking a break from social media. But I'll post about that when that happens. So if you want to communicate with me between now and then, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know when I'm going off. But yeah, you can just email me. You can find, I'll put my email in the show notes if you have just any comments or questions, or if you want to work with me. My website is www.schoolofwhispers.com. I am still offering energy work, readings, ceremonies, all that good stuff, but it definitely is very limited because my brain space and my energetic space is very limited as I'm rolling to the end of this semester. I will be home in Orlando for the majority of the month of December to kind of tie up loose ends. And I won't have school during that time. So yeah, if you do want to work with me, that'd probably be the most ideal. All right. Okay. I am done blabbing on here. I will be feeling your energy next year and next season and the next season of all of our lives. Sending you my love.